Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, we're going to go over a video from The Angry Cop, and he actually has some pretty good information in here. He talks a little bit about what schizophrenia is, accountability, and these are things that are very pertinent to the case here. And it's a good question to ask in general, where when does mental illness and insanity prevent someone from truly being held accountable? It's an interesting question, and I don't know if people really know the answer to it. I mean, in this case, I know what I think, but the angry cop here, he has a good video about this. So let's see. Well, actually, I should wait a minute for people to show up here. And let me reiterate what we know and don't know so far. We don't know when Nick Reiner has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Mac and Cheese, welcome to the stream. And we don't know when he's been diagnosed with schizophrenia. We don't know if he's been using or not. We don't know what specifically he went to this mental health or addiction rehab for several weeks ago. We don't know many things. So some of it is speculation. Some of it is what other people have had to say about things. Some of it is what TMZ is reporting based on an undisclosed source. More will be revealed, that is for sure. Brian, or is that Brienne? Welcome. Always sunny Jimmy, good to have you here this evening. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think we've got a good flock of black sheep here, and I think the community, for the very most part, is a pretty healthy community here that's supportive, encouraging. And there's a lot of people here that are here from all different walks of life. Some people found me because of my content about narcissism. Some people are here because of the Nick Reiner case. Some people are here maybe because of mental health stuff or addiction stuff. But we got a pretty cool mix of people here, which I think is awesome. Jimmy, TMZ equals always factual. You could say TMZ equals mouthpiece for Alan Johnson. That's what I would say. Sally, welcome back. Welcome back. And again, I think also to note, we're kind of running out of new information here about the case. Coming up this week, I might make some videos about some other topics too. Also announcements, the guy Mike Jones, or not Mike Jones, what is his name? Mike Smith? I think that's his name. The guy from Profiling Evil. He got back to me. We're going to try to schedule an interview together at some point in the new year. That should be cool. Yeah, so his name, Mike King, not Mike Smith. What am I talking about? But hopefully Mike King and I can schedule something where we can go over the Nick Reiner case. We can go over some toxic behaviors, toxic people. His new book, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. That'll be awesome to do. Yes, Mike King's the one. I'm also waiting back to hear from Dr. Glasner. But here's the thing, people. For the very most part, I can get most people now. There's really only a few people probably within the YouTube space. Let me clarify. There's not going to be celebrities coming on here for the very most part. But for the most part, a lot of YouTube people I can get, which is cool. The only people, say, in the narcissistic abuse space I haven't spoken to is Dr. Romney. So Dr. Romney's one that I would invite her on the show. She probably just doesn't want any pushback though either. She just wants to be considered the expert and have people listen. I might disagree with her on some things though, and she might not like that. Ellie, welcome. Well, it's not set in stone yet. We just had a little bit of an exchange, and we got to figure out when it's going to be in the new year. But it should be pretty cool. There should be no reason why it doesn't happen. He seems open to the idea. And we'll see. I might try to do that more, trying to find people involved with this case and get them on board. I think that would be pretty cool. Well, I'll check in, say hello, leave a like. Absolutely, Jimmy. Like and subscribe if you're not already. So let's jump into the angry cop here. This guy's pretty informative. I like this guy too. Now, there's a couple things he said in here I don't necessarily agree with, but for the very most part, I liked him.
Reiner and his wife were killed last week, and obviously a murder in Hollywood makes big headlines. And if you still don't know who Rob Reiner is, you'll know his movies like Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men. Did you order the code red?
You're goddamn right I did!
But what has captured a lot of people's interest in this investigation is that Rob Reiner's murderer is his son, Nick, and Nick suffers from schizophrenia and has a history of drug abuse. And what happens when something catches the eye of the internet and the thousands and millions of different channels and commenters? Well, just that. People make videos on it and comment on it and give their 2 cents. And a main topic in this conversation is the debate on how involved was Nick Reiner in his parents' murder because of his mental illness? How liable is he? Are other people responsible for his actions because he wasn't medicated enough or in some sort of assisted living or some other solution that wasn't put into effect that could have prevented this murder, potentially? So today we're going to answer some of those statements or questions in the comment section so people can get a better idea of the legal process and also the medical process and the combined legal and medical process, because they do have overlap. Ask me how I know. So that everybody can get a better picture of this specific topic that is a part of this overall investigation. But first, a word from this video sponsor. A big shout out to the Sonoran Desert Institute for sponsoring this video. They've updated their content to and almost a decade of experience from a psychiatric nurse practitioner who specifically focuses on bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and a whole bunch of other diagnoses. I had to rely on that nurse practitioner a lot, and there's going to be some big words here. So what do you say we get started? One of the most reoccurring comments that I see is that the doctors are at fault. It's always the doctors. It's either something they didn't do or they did do intentionally, pill pushers, and their actions or lack thereof directly caused this murder. Now, the doctor could be found negligent, but that is such a long stretch when it comes to outpatient care. Outpatient care meaning you are not locked down at a hospital under lock and key, being viewed by orderlies, nurses, or other staff, and made to take your medication. So as an outpatient, once you're done visiting your doctor or provider or psychiatric nurse practitioner, you get to go home and go into the streets and make your own decisions, which could go directly against what the doctor's telling you to do.
And again, this is why mental health and addiction treatment can be so difficult, because if you're not compliant with your meds and you're not willing to change, it's going to be extremely difficult to help that person. And both of those issues, they compound on one another. Someone struggling with addiction, but if they also have untreated mental illness, it's going to be much less likely they even want to get clean if their addiction is their only form of escape and relief. So this is all true, what he's saying here. And it's really difficult also to hold doctors accountable for negligence as well. You have to have a lot of paper trails and proof to even begin doing that. And I doubt there's going to be enough in this case to even think about doing that. To me, the issue is really about the law in California. You can only keep someone there against their will for 72 hours. It probably needs to be way more than that. And maybe indefinitely if they're still going to be a danger to others.
Like use drugs, which Nick had been known to do in the past, considering that he went to rehab numerous times. Do you think a doctor is telling him, hey, bud, being that you're a schizophrenic, you definitely want to do crack while you're on this drug? Which I don't think happened at all. And if that did happen, I think your doctor's probably Charlie Sheen and you're on a movie set. Run. In an outpatient setting, doctors can only do so much. You got to remember, patients have rights too, and they don't have to adhere to a treatment if they feel like it's not helping them, which is a massive hurdle, especially when it comes to psychiatric help. I've been taking my medication for a month. I feel really good. Therefore, I don't need my medication anymore. No. You taking the medication regularly, often, usually, as a very vast generality here, is what's making you feel good.
And this is very true here. This is something that happens to a lot of people that struggle with mental illness. They get on a medicine and then they start to feel better. They start to feel stabilized. They have less anxiety, less depression. And then they have the wonderful idea to think, well, I don't need to take my medicine anymore. I feel better. They don't equate it to, wow, maybe this medicine is helping me feel better. They don't do that sometimes, and sometimes they just hop right off. A good example of this is in the show 6 Feet Under. What's his name's character? Brenda's brother, Billy. That's his name. So Billy was a good example of this. He would be stabilized on his medication, but then he would also complain of not feeling good. Like he had the highs were cut off, but so were the lows. And sometimes he wanted to feel more. So intentionally he would get off his medicine, and then he would go a little bit unhinged and he'd become unstable. But this is something that happens a lot of times with people that have mental illness. Not every time, because some people certainly are med compliant. Other people, they really struggle to find a cocktail of medicines or supplements that really work for them. And sometimes people never find it. And one of my friends that was diagnosed with schizophrenia, what would happen to him was if he were to stop taking his medication, he would get a positive reward from it at first. He would feel better. He would like go into a positive mania. So sometimes he'd be tempted to do that. But then what would always happen is he would get stressed, and maybe he was at work. And the more stressors that he was experiencing, the more likely he was to have a psychotic episode. Now, throw any kinds of stimulants or illegal drugs on top of that, way more likely to have an episode then too. So that's something I've seen happen a lot.
The meds are doing what they're supposed to at that dosage. The second that you stop, now your bipolar disorder is going to kick in and you're going to have those manic episodes.
And he's correct about this. And Awake Now in the chat, she made a very good point, or he made a very good point about sometimes the side effects from the medicines. Yeah, it's working, but they don't like the side effects. What are the side effects? A lot of times the side effects are weight gain, or maybe sluggishness, or maybe sexual dysfunction. And people don't like that. So they think, you know what? I want to be able to enjoy sex again. I don't like all of this weight gain. So maybe I'll stop taking it for a little bit to stop this weight gain. But there's reasons, and those side effects can certainly be a reason that people want to stop as well. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Where all of a sudden, randomly in the middle of the night, you're going to empty your bank account, fly to Las Vegas, and spend every dime on the poker tables because you are absolutely sure you found a scheme in order to beat the house. Geez, AC, that's pretty specific. Has that happened? Yes. Yes, that's happened. More than once to many people. And on top of that, medication therapy that we're talking about, just staying on it and trying to figure out whether or not this is good for you or how much or how little, that is all trial and error. Sure, you might be diagnosed with something, but psychiatric personnel need to figure out which specific drug works well with you and what might have bad reactions to medication you're already on. And then you have to figure out the dosage. Which brings me to my point earlier. Nick was still using controlled substances, illegal substances, crack, meth, heroin, whatever it was.
And we don't know this for sure. This is one of the things I kind of disagreed with him on. We don't know what he was really using for sure. We don't know if when he went to that treatment center 3-4 weeks ago, was it mental health related only? Or was there addiction stuff going on as well? Or was it just the fact that he wasn't getting his meds right? Like the meds were not working properly for him and he was trying to adjust. Which one was it? Or maybe it was the meds that were prescribed to him withdrawal. We don't know about that. So it's hard to say. These are the things we're going to learn in the toxicology report. Or some of it. We might not even learn all of it because what happened several weeks ago might not show up in a toxicology report. Now, maybe a hair test will go back further. That's true as well. But this part we're not sure about.
He was still using a drug while on those antipsychotics or other medications that were given to him by his doctors. Now, still within this bubble that we're talking about, that doctors are at fault, patients can also refuse recommended medications. You have the right to do that. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you got somebody with bipolar disorder, okay? They might refuse a mood stabilizer, but they're taking an antidepressant and a stimulant. Now, unless it's court ordered, they can refuse the mood stabilizer. Interesting, huh? Now, here's the seesaw effect of cause and effect. Because that patient is refusing to take the mood stabilizer with those other medications, the doctor can then refuse those two previous medications, the antidepressant and the stimulant. Why? Because those two together without the mood stabilizer can induce a mania. But what's a mania? Remember when I talked about taking all your cash out of your bank account, flying to Vegas on a whim, and then putting it all on black?
Correct. This is what happens to people that have bipolar 1, bipolar 2, sometimes even schizophrenia. They take anything that's stimulatory in nature. And even SSRIs can provoke mania sometimes in people that are susceptible to it. But also stimulant medications like Wellbutrin. They give people Wellbutrin a lot of times to quit smoking or weight loss. Or things like Adderall, Ritalin, Vyvanse. Those things can make people who are bipolar manic. So what do? You would have to go on some sort of mood stabilizer. Mood stabilizers are things like Lamictal, lithium, and there's others out there, but that keeps those moods stable. And as Awake Now said in the chat too, he mentioned chemical imbalance, and that's part of what it can be, but there's many things going into that. Maybe there's hormones out of whack. Maybe there's a connection issue with like relationships. There's so many things that it possibly could be. Thyroid issues. So chemical imbalance is vague.
That would be a mania. And with all that being said, it's still extremely important for patients to have the right to refuse medication. You can't force medication down people's throat unless there's something ridiculously out of left field and they're super violent and they've already stabbed 30 babies, right? Why is it important that patients are allowed to refuse medication or treatment? Well, because you could be dropped off at a mental facility and just left there because husbands would drop off their naggy wives at psychiatric hospitals and say, it's been.
No, mood stabilizers are not the same as antipsychotics. They can have some overlapping effects, but generally they are different. Now, as Zyprexa, Seroquel, they're all considered antipsychotics. They may have some mood stabilization effects, but they're not necessarily the same as just a mood stabilizer. Something like lithium is a mood stabilizer. More of a Lamictal is a mood stabilizer, right? And like someone said in the chat as well, people who are bipolar, they have to be really careful with any kinds of SSRIs, SNRIs, or any kinds of stimulant medications because they can provoke manias. And I do see it sometimes happen where they're on those meds, but then they're also definitely on a mood stabilizer to prevent that mania and to prevent those crashes as well.
She's crazy. Keep her locked up in here. I'll sign the paperwork. She can't get out. And a normal person would be trapped in a hospital for years until staff would eventually go, you know, besides being a bitch, I don't think that she's crazy at all. The insanity defense. Everybody's talking about the insanity defense. He was on a schizophrenic break, so therefore he's going to be walking free because he's pleading for insanity. Or he was on drugs at the time, so therefore he can't plead insanity because he took the drugs, and that's what made him do it. And that was a choice that he made. And his actions of taking drugs while having schizophrenia and being on those drugs was a reckless act that could have caused damage to himself and anybody around. And there's no excuse for it, and he knew better, and that's what caused it.
And so to answer a question in the chat, Lamictal is generally used for bipolar type 2, and it's meant to curb depressive episodes. That's what it's for. And it's less effective for acute mania, but that's what Lamictal is used for. Now, me personally, I take something called lithium orotate. That's a natural version of the prescription lithium carbonate. Lithium carbonate, you need all sorts of blood tests to check for your liver issues if you take it, I think. But lithium orotate, no, it's a natural version, much less powerful. But for me, I've been taking it for years, and it really helps me.
Or a combination of the two. He's on drugs, but he's schizophrenic, so he can't get, but he can get, but he let get. Now, as of right now, while I'm filming this video, and I'm certain it probably won't come out until the actual trial dates when this thing is broadcast to the world on trial, we don't know if drugs were a factor in this, whether it be illegal drugs like coke or crack or heroin or fentanyl or meth, or if it was prescribed drugs or a mix of the two, or a straight up psychotic break because of his schizophrenia. With those powers combined, you're forming Captain Storm. So honestly, we're going to have to wait for him to get an evaluation to determine his level of schizophrenia, how it affects his daily life, blood tests to determine what medications he was on, legitimate ones, or off if it was something that he had to take but wasn't on it.
Correct. And again, to me, that schizophrenia diagnosis needs to be confirmed. We heard it from the TMZ undisclosed source, which is probably the defense team and Alan Jackson, but that's not confirmed yet. I want to see that schizophrenia diagnosis be confirmed. I'm not ruling it out completely, but I'm not saying he definitely has it either. I also got the vibes that he was undiagnosed on the autistic spectrum. And again, don't get that confused with people who are autistic being violent. No, most autistic people are not violent, just like most people with schizophrenia are not violent. So don't make that mistake either. But we have to see what's going on with that. And as I've said in the previous videos, I think there is some vulnerable narcissism going on there, some sort of character disorder, maybe even a version of psychopathy. That's just my opinion, but that seems to me to be a little bit of what was going on there. And if you go back as a child, you see some of his mood irregularities. You see him being a little bit out of control. So this is not something that happened just recently. This has been how he has been for years.
And that includes drugs, as in like crack or meth. Depending on the time that he gets tested, you can backtrack to see how long it was in his system for, how much, or when he used it. Was it before, during, or after he murdered his parents? Let's talk a little bit about schizophrenia, right? Nick was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but let's learn more. Schizophrenia often presents itself in males in the early 20s, like that 19 to 25-year-old stage. And now substance use, that means using drugs, right, that you're not prescribed, doing a bump here and there, smoking that rock. And in many cases, I've seen teenage kids when they smoke marijuana for the first or second time, especially spice. It can cause a psychosis, but it can also exacerbate underlying schizophrenia. Bam, make it float up to the top, and now you know there's an issue. And that is what one would call a mental break. And generally speaking, you got a late teen, early 20s young man that's feeling like he's depressed, but that depression is actually an underlying symptom of schizophrenia. Decides that he's gonna smoke a blunt or do a bump or go hop on Molly when he goes to the music.
And yeah, if he did really have schizophrenia, weed during that age, the teenage years into early 20 years before your frontal lobe is fully developed, terrible for schizophrenia. Crack and meth, coke, terrible for schizophrenia. So he wasn't doing himself any favors if that's really what he had when he was using those illegal drugs.
Festival. And then pow, that forces everything to the forefront, causes a mental break. And now, well, schizophrenia is front and center. The next comment is something that I've seen a lot with, I guess, people that don't really enjoy due process. And that is, he should have been hospitalized. He should not have been free to walk the streets or hang out with his parents. He's got schizophrenia. He should be in a hospital, period. And schizophrenia doesn't mean you're going to start doing meth underneath a throughway and then start stabbing your parents back at home. Although, sure, there are some extreme examples where people need to stay in custody in a hospital for 24/7 care. That is few, extremely few scenarios, especially with schizophrenia. Can a person that has schizophrenia put themselves in a hospital voluntarily? Sure. Now, can a parent or guardian put their kid that has schizophrenia in the hospital for a period of time so they can be evaluated? Of course they can. But those are far from like the loony bin lockdowns that you see in old movies where you drop off Jimmy.
And he's talking about basically One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest here. That's what that place was all about. But this is the thing. This is the $1 million question in the whole thing, right? Where do you lose your right to be free if you're a danger to other people? Right now in California, they can only take you off the streets apparently for 72 hours. But there are some cases clearly where I think it needs to be more like a temporary, permanent thing where until that person is deemed safe to themselves and others, they should probably be under care. That doesn't mean they have to be there permanently against their will. I think they just need to be approved as okay, this person safe. And he's talking about the due process of it all here, and that can be part of the problem, right? And this is something that the Hidden Killers podcast with Tom, I think his name is, he was talking about this, and he was talking about it as part of the problem, where civil liberties is being disguised as abandonment, or maybe he said it the other way around. But I get it, but there does, I think, need to be a point somewhere where if someone's a danger to themselves or others, you have to be able to do something. Even if that person hasn't broken the law yet, there has to be a preventative measure in there somewhere, in my opinion. Right now, there just isn't one longer than the 72 hours. So we've seen a couple cases where we've seen the worst case. Nick Reiner here, this is the worst case. The North Carolina train incident, that's another worst case. So we got to try to do something about that, I think.
With the helmet and you rub his head and say goodbye and send him into the funny bin. Those are voluntary inpatients, which means that they're putting themselves in there and they can remove themselves from there. There's no lockdown. In order for somebody with a mental health issue or having a mental health episode to be involuntarily placed in a hospital or psychiatric care, they would need to be a threat to themselves or others. In New York State, we have mental health law 941 will say make statements that you are a harm to yourself or others. That means suicide threats, or ideations, or violent threats to a family member. Then you can't.
And so that's what you have to prove then in New York, right? How do you prove they're a threat to themselves or others? There has to be some sort of process for proving that. And maybe that's what he's about to go over.
Can be involuntarily admitted, but even then, those are limited. The longest I think I've heard for involuntary stays when it comes to mental health law are like 3 days, and then you are out of there. Usually it's less, but the maximum is 72 hours. Which brings us to, did Nick even have those ideations? I know that there's like articles coming out now that he was acting weird and asking inappropriate questions, but a strange guy asking weird questions at a Hollywood party is probably pretty par for the course. That thousand-eye stare after somebody does a couple Quaaludes with, what's his name, the Jell-O guy? As long as he's not an actual threat to somebody's personal safety or his own life, he's not going to be admitted. There are very few situations where a court will actually order an individual to take medications, and those are so extreme and few and far in between. And in those extreme situations where a court orders an individual to be on a medication, there are strict criteria that have to be met. And walking around doing crack, being schizophrenic, is not enough to force somebody to be on meds.
And that part's true, but again, where's the line and how do you prove it, right? That's the $1 million question there, where there needs to be a threshold somewhere. I'm not saying people should be taken off the streets willy-nilly, but there does need to be a line at some point. Okay. And perhaps one of those lines is when your father, Rob, who reportedly said, I'm petrified of my son, I think he could hurt me. That's probably a good sign. A good sign. All right, maybe this guy should be taken off the streets here. His own father is saying this at this point. Now, Anne in the chat asked a good question. Can people be mandated to rehab? And the answer to that question is absolutely. A lot of times the courts, what they'll do, the judge will say, all right, sometimes if they think substance abuse is really the issue and it's maybe a petty offense, maybe instead of sending them to jail for like 90 days, they'll say, you know what? You will go to drug and alcohol rehab and you have to complete the program, but you'll do that instead of going to jail. When I worked at a behavioral drug and alcohol rehab for teens, that's what would happen to a lot of the kids there. Instead of going to the juvenile hall, they would come to this place instead. Now, if they didn't complete the program or they got kicked out, they were going straight to juvie. So obviously a lot of the kids, and some of the kids who were savvy, they were more criminals, but they would say, you know, I have a problem with drugs and alcohol. I want to get sent to this place instead of sent to juvie. But other people, it did really help them. And I've seen people that when I was there, I was in my late 20s, and these kids were like 15 to 19-ish. There's one guy who's a police officer now, and he's like a good, outstanding, productive member of society. And he's like one of the success stories of the place. So I'm proud of him. But then there's other people I know from that place. They're dead now. Dead from using. One person was shot and killed. So it can go both ways.
Half of the homeless population in California. Now, I will say it is somewhat difficult to get people with schizophrenia to maintain their medication intake regularly. Why is that? Well, people with schizophrenia generally lack a lot of insight. What does that mean? Well, it means that they may not feel or believe that they're sick. Everything that they're experiencing feels real. However, their reality is not the same as others. They might hear or see things that others can't hear or see. They can have delusions, which are fixed beliefs, despite of any evidence showing otherwise. An example would be there's a brown car that's there sometimes, and sometimes it's not. And therefore, that is a federal agent that is sent to watch me. When it's the neighbor's son who shows up a couple days a week to check on his parents. And that could be any car on the street or any person walking their dog in the neighborhood. To us, it's just a regular community occurrence. Jared's son comes home and visits. Martha walks the dog. But for somebody with schizophrenia, they're experiencing that in a very different way. And that is their reality. But even then, that's totally legal to think that the feds are after you and that your neighbor walking the dog is one of the spies. It's not illegal to think that. You would be hard-pressed to find any judge that would say, we need to lock that guy up because he stares out of his window too long each day and thinks that he's being watched by the FBI.
And this is true. The friend of mine who had schizophrenia, he didn't really think he did. He told me the psychiatrists think I have schizophrenia, but he truly believed he was having battles with the devil. That's truly what he believed. But for the very most part, he was med compliant, though. He didn't agree with his diagnosis, but he took his meds and he didn't use illegal drugs anymore. So to his credit, he did get better. And that is true of other people with schizophrenia as well. People fight the diagnosis. They don't want to believe it. And that's not everybody. There are some people who accept the diagnosis, but there are certainly people who do not accept it and they fight it. And they're not med compliant, etc. Now, there's a different kind of argument out there, too, where some people have said people with schizophrenia have one foot in the spiritual world, one foot in the real world. I've looked into that, and maybe there's some truth in that. I don't know. I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I know it all. I think there's still mysteries in the world here, just like how I mentioned where drug addiction can be a form of possession. I do think that can be used as a term, as a form of possession, if you ask me. Just like gambling, being a gambling addict, you can be possessed by like a gambling demon or a pornography demon, fill in the blank. So it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to explore.
Let's go to my favorite comment. Schizophrenia isn't real. It's demonic possession. No, schizophrenia is real. It's very real. It's simply an imbalance of neurotransmitters.
And I don't necessarily like that definition of it. I think it's a little more complex than that. And he's going to go into more of the complexities here. But I also I get what he's saying. Like schizophrenia is very real. Absolutely. Is it demonic possession? No, I don't necessarily think it's demonic possession. But that being said, the guy I just told you about, he wrote a book about his experience, and I read that book as if he was telling the truth. And I fully believe he was telling the truth, and he does really think it's true. But which is true? I'm not sure, to be honest. But let me put it this way. I'm not completely ruling it out either. How about that? I'm not completely ruling it out that maybe he was having these battles with these entities. I don't know. I don't know enough to say.
What does that mean? Big brain, it's an issue with your mesolimbic pathway, which is dopamine. It's how you receive dopamine. In fact, it's an overabundance of dopamine, which equals hallucinations and delusions. Dopamine overactivity, hallucinations, and delusions. I'm so freaking happy. I can take on the world and do anything, but that can also go to the negative. Everybody's watching me. The man in the commercials about mesothelioma is talking directly to me. And with schizophrenia, there's other issues with glutamate, serotonin, and GABA norepinephrine. I hope I said that right. And that means
Norepinephrine is what he means. So the main neurotransmitters involved in mood disorders, there's GABA, norepinephrine, there's serotonin, there's dopamine, and there's adrenaline. But all of those are things that the acetylcholine transmitters, they are the ones that impact mood the most. So there's supplements, things like 5-HTP, they're supposed to stabilize your serotonin. Then there's other supplements that help with your dopamine, things like tyrosine or DL-phenylalanine. And these are the things that those prescription drugs, whether it's an SNRI, selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, versus an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, those are the differences between the two.
underactivity in the mesocortical pathway. Now, you might be saying, what does that mean? I didn't know until I talked to the psych nurse. But you know how the overactivity of dopamine means delusions and hallucinations? Well, the underactivity in the mesocortical pathway equals negative symptoms like social withdrawal, cognitive issues, motivation, poor hygiene. Now, and when you put these two things together, the dopamine and the underproductivity, you get the stereotypical combination of the lone homeless guy under a bridge that has horrible hygiene and stinks and is a recluse from the rest of the world and is screaming at the sky saying that the radio is talking directly to him and that birds aren't real. So I'm sorry, Aunt Kathy, it's not a demonic possession. However, you still can pray the rosary over somebody with schizophrenia. Next comment. Someone diagnosed with a serious illness doesn't have the same rights as non-mentally ill people. Wrong. Wrong. They absolutely do have the same rights as us. What do you think? What? The only people.
I mean, everyone has the same rights under the law in America, right? And if you're a citizen here, you have the rights like upheld to you by the Constitution, right? Now, where that would no longer apply is if they make these rules that, yeah, you can be committed against your will. But right now, it's really difficult to have that. So for the very most part, people have equal rights under the law.
People who don't have the same rights as everybody else would be felons because they can't own a firearm anymore or vote or be 100 feet within a school. Like anybody diagnosed with mental health issues absolutely has the same rights as everybody else. And as I've stated before, yes, they can be forced to get treatment per court order, but that needs to meet specific criteria and are extreme cases, very few and far in between. Now, this is just for New York State, but in order to get that court order, you need these and potentially some other things. 2 physician certifications. That means not just one, but 2 doctors have to go, yeah, he needs it, he's got to be on it, otherwise bad things are going to happen to him or those around him. 2, a judicial hearing if that person still continues to object to any treatment, or AOT, which is assisted outpatient treatment, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's outpatient, so you're outside of the hospital. You can go and get treatment at a hospital and go somewhere else, but you need additional assistance while outside of a hospital, not on lockdown. Chilling in your own apartment or your parents' house or some other assisted living establishment. New York State specifically practices patients' rights, and they are super strict. Not sure how California is, but the amount of people that are put on suspension during ridiculous complaints from people that don't know what they're talking about trying to play the system in a psychiatric hospital are insane. Example, there are some female patients that will say that anybody and everybody is sexually assaulting them while they're in the hospital or they're at an inpatient facility. But some of these individuals that are in there are making these complaints 20, 30 times a year while 2 people are in the room with them because nobody wants to be alone in a room with them at all or underneath cameras. And the individuals within that hospital are put on suspension or moved to a separate floor while that investigation takes place. And I'm not saying this to be like, we shouldn't believe people in psych hospitals for sexual abuse or any other crime that happens to them. I'm saying that Workers at inpatient facilities are constantly being moved around or are walking on pins and needles around their patients because each complaint is taken so seriously at inpatient facilities. So of course he has the same rights as everybody else, whether he's got a mental condition or he doesn't. And like I said previously, the only way that would change is if he had some sort of incident with law enforcement that would change his status. But from what is out right now, there's never been an arrest or an assault that has led to an arrest or a police complaint. It's all been rehab. Why do I feel like that's just some white Karen? Just, they don't have the same rights as us because they're special. Like, what are you talking about? That'd be like saying your bipolar mother doesn't have the same rights that we do because she's bipolar and on some sort of mood stabilizer. He's just going to claim insanity like a whole bunch of other people, and he's going to get away with it. Just because you suffer from a mental illness doesn't mean that you automatically get to claim the insanity clause and walk away scot-free or spend your time in a funny bin prison.
And this is what the title here is all about, right? Mental illness versus accountability. There's very clear criteria to be considered not guilty by reason of insanity. You have to no longer know if what you did was right or wrong. And you have to be completely out of your mind and not know. I don't think he's going to meet that requirement, in my opinion. I think there's too many signs that say he did know. He knew what was going on. He did too many actions that proved he knew what was going on. And to me, this was a long time coming. I don't think it was just, all right, spur of the moment. I'm out of my mind. I don't know right from wrong. I'm going to do this. That's not the impression I get at all.
Under less security with a nice television and you can walk around without handcuffs. I'll give you an example. Letitia Stauch. She murdered her stepson, but claimed to have DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. And for those of you who don't know what that is, you ever see the movie Split? That's multiple personality disorder, now known as DID. Do you know what Letitia did? She killed her stepson in his bedroom the day that he went missing. She stabbed him 18 times, smashed him in the head with an inanimate object, and then shot him. She cleaned up the crime scene, threw his body in a gosh dang suitcase, and then drove around for 4 hours with him in the suitcase in her trunk. The poor kid's remains were found 1,300 miles away. She even dumped the kid's body somewhere, rented a van, went back to the scene, and moved him again. Now, she had a mental health disorder that she said was brought on by trauma of being sexually abused as a kid. That doesn't give you a get out of jail free pass to claim the insanity clause.
100% correct. Trauma and SA as a kid is an awful thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not an excuse for heinous crimes. It's not an excuse for toxic behavior, period, right? It can be sometimes you can say it's an explanation in some cases, but that's not an excuse, and you still need to be held accountable, right? It's not a get out of jail free card. I've made videos in the past. Trauma is not an excuse for poor behavior. It might explain in some cases, but once we know better, it's up to us to do better. Bottom line.
Now, we don't know if Nick premeditated the murder of his mother and father, and I'm sure more information will come out of exactly what he did before, during, and after the murder of his parents. But you got to remember, the insanity claim puts a lot more burden on the defense to prove that the guy that they're representing, the defendant, is so off his rocker that in no way, shape, or form could he have actually known what he was doing. Maybe it was drugs. Maybe it was mental illness. Maybe it was both. Or maybe he was totally sane and just had enough of going to rehab and decided, tonight's the night and I'm going to do this. But we don't have that information yet. And even without it, the insanity claim is still a really big stretch.
It is certainly a really big stretch in this case. I think it'll be a miracle for him if he's able to pull it off. But that being said, an expensive lawyer like Alan Jackson, if anyone can do it, it might be someone like him. Which also reminds me, there was someone very upset with me in the comments. They said, "Oh, you're insulting public defenders if you think they aren't going to be as good as someone like Alan Jackson." And I'm like, there's a reason why most of them are public defenders. Now, granted, some people start off as that. They'll do it maybe even as a pro bono thing. So it's not a guarantee they're not good. But that being said, there's a reason why people pay the big bucks for people like Alan Jackson as well, because they're good at their jobs, right? So to say there's no difference ever between a public defender and a high-priced lawyer, to me, is not true. That's not true.
His parents knew he was dangerous. No, schizophrenia does not equal dangerous or violent. Now, they can have delusions and command hallucinations. A command hallucination is like the fan or the TV telling you that you need to go outside in your underwear and do 30 jumping jacks every morning so that the sky doesn't fall down. It could also be the neighbor's dog telling you to kill people. New York City, 1970s.
The Son of Sam case, we went over that the other day too, right? But these are the three causes of schizophrenic violence. Dr. Grande went over this as well in the video we went over, I guess, a few days ago now. And I don't think any of these apply to Nick, by the way. Now, I reserve the right to change my mind if I learn new facts, but as of right now, I don't see it.
Son of Sam. But people with schizophrenia are far more likely to be victims of crimes rather than perpetrators. Remember, they're living in an augmented reality. They're hearing things and seeing things that we aren't, that aren't necessarily there, but are very real to them. And people take advantage of that. Medical providers are drug pushers. I mean, sure, yeah, I think everybody's seen the TV and like looked around and said, do I really need to be on 30 different medications because my cholesterol's a little high, but then I need a different medication to fix the cholesterol medication that makes my blood pressure spike. So now I need blood pressure medication, but now I need an anti-inflammatory for that blood pressure medication. Sure. Per the nurse practitioner, not just me, everybody should be aware of the drugs that they take and should medicate only as needed. And the lesser amount of drugs that you're on, pharmaceuticals, the better. Especially if you want to reduce adverse effects. Like I said, you're on one pill which causes something and you need another pill to combat that cause. However, severe persistent mental illness should and usually do require medications. And it's oftentimes more dangerous to go without them. Do you want to go to a mechanic who tells you that your brakes are bad, but you decide that you want to drive around without brakes anyway? Once again, imagine being the person that is in a manic episode and decides to dump his bank account, go to Vegas and blow all his money because he thinks he's got a scheme. Wouldn't you want to stop that from happening? Do I trust the pharmaceutical companies? No, but it is important that you gain control of your mental health.
And that's correct. And again, I'm all for whatever works for people. I mean, preferably, you wouldn't need prescription medication. Like you can do supplements like I do, or just get your sleep, diet, and exercise down. And that can improve a lot of things for a lot of people. But will it be enough for everyone? Absolutely not. And there's people that can be in great shape, sleep well, and still have a mood disorder or still have a mental illness. That happens as well. So the people that say, oh, the best antidepressant is the gym. And I would say, yeah, the gym's probably not going to hurt. I mean, I need the gym myself. But will it be enough for everyone? Absolutely not. So for the people that it's not enough for, well, that's where the prescription medication comes in, where if you have severe mental illness, I do think there are times where absolutely prescription medication can absolutely help people. I don't take any myself, but I don't have anything against the people that do. If you're bipolar or schizophrenic or fill in the blank and you have a medication that really helps you, I'm all for it. Now, the issue to me would be if people are on all sorts of meds and then not doing any better. Now that's an issue, right? Now, okay, you got to change up the cocktail. But one thing's for sure, if what you're doing is not working, you got to do something different. That's the bottom line too. If nothing changes, nothing changes.
He was thinking clearly because he checked into a hotel after. I don't know if this person's trying to say that he can't plead insanity or he was 100% in his right mind because he checked in a hotel. If you're trying to say that he was doing that because he was trying to get away, he really didn't do too much to hide his quote unquote escape. He was just walking around town and then needed a place to stay and obviously couldn't go back home because he knew what he just did, or was still in some sort of state of mind where he knew he couldn't go home. And also, we don't know if this is normal behavior. Remember, he was a drug addict and went to rehab a whole bunch of times, and he happens to be a schizophrenic. Par for the course for a lot of incidents that I've dealt with schizophrenics is they'll often just leave home. They'll go somewhere else, they'll get a hotel, and that's it. They don't want to be home for some reason, or they...
And that's the other thing, right? As TM said in the chat, so maybe you have a mental illness, you take a medicine, and it helps that mental illness. But then it's like whack-a-mole, and you have another 100 issues pop up in its place. If you're a guy, maybe you now have erectile dysfunction, or maybe now fill in the blank with another issue, weight gain. So I've seen that happen a lot too. So it puts people in a bind. Okay, this pill gets rid of the crazies in a way, but then it gives me these other issues. So now you have to weigh the pros and cons. All right, is the pro of being on this medicine better than the con? And again, that's for each person to decide. And some of it depends on how severely mentally ill they are as well, where if you are thinking, for example, of ending your own life, well, now you probably need something, right? And despite the side effects, getting that something will probably be better than doing nothing in that case. But again, I'm not even saying prescription medication is the only way to deal with that. Like if you have those idealizations, there's other things too. I mean, a spiritual component come into play. There's all sorts of factors. Like all of this stuff, it's intertwined. Like there's really not just a one solution fix to a lot of this, because the cause is multifaceted. Like there's many things going into the issues, not just one thing usually. Now, occasionally, maybe someone has a hormonal imbalance somehow, and they fix that hormonal imbalance, and all of a sudden they feel better. Or maybe the thyroid isn't producing the hormones properly. Yeah, that can be a one thing. All right, you do the one thing differently, and you're good. But for a lot of different things, for a lot of other things, it's not that simple.
They feel like they need to be somewhere else. Case in point, I had a guy that would just leave home, not call his parents, and would go from one side of the state to New Jersey. And he just kept getting picked up in New Jersey over and over and over again. His normal occurrence could be going to a hotel to use, or going to a hotel because it's the same hotel that he goes to every time that he has a schizophrenic break. And it may not be the same hotel. It may just be a hotel. Now, I know I've already went over how difficult it is to claim insanity on a murder case, but this is also one of those moments where that could be par for the course for whenever Nick would have a schizophrenic break or not take his meds. He would leave the house and go to a hotel somewhere and then be found 100 or 50 miles away or on the opposite side of the state. Now, this is going to come to light after the family is thoroughly interviewed by detectives so that they can understand what is the normal day-to-day with Nick and what would be the norm when he would have these breaks or when he would use and have a break. He's just a sociopath or psychopath. I mean, maybe, but he would need a psychological evaluation for that. I mean, he's already got schizophrenia.
Now, this is where this guy's jumping the gun a bit. So this is really one of the only things I disagree with him on. We don't know about that yet. I'm not ruling it out, but that hasn't been confirmed. Just like being a psychopath or sociopath is not confirmed either, right? But here's the thing. You do that to your parents outside of some sort of psychotic break, chances are you might got a little bit of that going on.
Schizophrenics aren't usually socio or psychopaths, but as of this moment, no source has said that he's either one of those things. And honestly, if you're going to overreact and just start splaying that out, I'm sure every ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend that anybody's ever had is a psychopath or a sociopath. How overused are those two things? Oh God, she would put ketchup on her eggs? What a psychopath. Oh my God, he's like always texting you. What a sociopath. If that's the case, then Tinder is filled with sociopaths and psychopaths. But that doesn't mean that everybody on a date is getting stabbed in the neck when they're at home. So there you have it. We don't have a lot of information at this moment, but people are jumping to conclusions, and I hope that I clarified some of the questions that were out there in the comment sections on Twitter and YouTube and all the other video breakdowns of this unfortunate murder. If you have a question or a statement that you want to make about the investigation that's going on right now, feel free to leave it in the comments. Maybe I'll answer it. Maybe I'll make a second video. I don't know. If you like these videos where I break down mental health law and how that goes into a law enforcement investigation, give it a thumbs up. Maybe I'll make more. If you hate it, then give it a thumbs down, and I won't.
Now, this part was interesting to me, or this video was interesting to me, because he went over what's required to be committed. And that's like a very interesting part of the story to me. And he went over a little bit more about schizophrenia as well, which I think is interesting, but a lot of stuff is yet to be known. We don't know if it's officially schizophrenic. We don't know what was in his system. We don't know what meds he was on. There's so many things we just don't know. But that's the end of this video here. And there's the next one. We might only do a couple videos tonight. I'm a little tired today. Derek Van Shake.
Are a meathead.
I get crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
You don't want to set me off.
Why did Nick Reiner allegedly take the lives of his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner? On Sunday, December 14th, in their Brentwood, California home, Rob, 78, and Michelle, 68, were both allegedly sadly murdered by their 32-year-old son, Nick, who had a lengthy history of substance addiction and mental health problems. Rob Reiner gained his initial fame in the 1970s, acting as Meathead in the sitcom All in the Family.
You are a meathead. And meathead, dead from the neck up.
Then went on to directing, producing, and even acting in many famous shows and movies.
$26,000 for one dinner.
We're going to break down Nick's relationship with his parents and psychologically piece together the evidence to reveal how this happened and why he allegedly did it. Now, let's get started.
Sometimes I just come out to gather my sick thoughts.
Nick Reiner has a lengthy history of substance addiction and mental health issues from a very young age, where by the age of just 22, Nick was reportedly in rehab 18 times and had several stints of homelessness.
Many people in the neighborhood say that the son Nick had been troubled his whole youth.
In 2016, Rob and his son Nick made a movie together titled Being Charlie, which depicted many of Nick's struggles with drug addiction.
I'm one of your constituents now. You wouldn't want to lose the governor's race by one vote.
You can either head back to treatment or live on the streets. It's your choice.
And working on this movie together seemed to help Rob better understand his son's struggles.
It forced me to understand a lot more of what Nick was going through, and I think it forced him to see what I was going through, and that brought us closer together.
And at this point, his family optimistically believed the worst was behind them after Nick helped make this movie, hoping that Nick could be looked up to as a success story of...
And even there, look at him. Look at Nick. He looks healthier there than he does recently. Now, depending on the picture, though, there's also some wild-eyed looking pictures of him as well that seem to be closer to this time frame. But this seems to be around the time where he was definitely using, but notice he doesn't look like that unhealthy here, surprisingly. Now, compare that to how he looks recently. He looks out of his mind recently, which makes you wonder, yeah, what was the cocktail of meds he was on? What drugs was he using if he was using? Interesting to know.
Overcoming addiction.
It's life. Life goes on. Life happens.
However, after the movie was released, Nick sadly relapsed again.
Yeah, I'm a big-time screenwriter, baby.
He's a big-time screenwriter, baby.
Nick apparently continued to struggle with drug addiction and mental health and was living in the guest house on his parents' property.
It's impressive, but understated. Grand, but charming.
Even though he admittedly destroyed it previously.
Yeah, I went 10 rounds with my guest house. Got totally spun out on uppers. I think it was coke and something else, and I was up for days on end, and I started punching out different things in my guest house. Everything in the guest house got wrecked.
This is all starting to show us that his parents, Rob and Michelle, are becoming much more lenient with Nick.
Crazy good, though, you ham. Every year I get so excited.
I got invited to Conan's Christmas party.
I have fantastic party.
On the evening of Saturday, September 13th, Conan O'Brien threw his annual holiday party at his home where Rob, Michelle, and their son Nick attended. But this was when it all sadly went downhill.
Sources telling NBC News that Rob Reiner and his wife took their son Nick to a party hosted by Conan O'Brien, and it was...
Kristen said in the chat, this is awesome, I like this. If you're familiar with Stephen King's book, Christine, she said, Nick here is giving Arnie vibes. You know, if you know anything about Arnie, he basically goes homicidal in the book. But that's a good comparison because it's similar. I think if you read that book, and I haven't read it for a while, nor have I seen the movie for a while either, but he's kind of got a similar vibe. I get this like similar vibe to the way Nick is. Not identical, of course, but similar.
At that event, they say that the 32-year-old began acting erratically, was disruptive, making other guests feel uncomfortable, and that led to an altercation with his own parents.
It was reported that he was asking guests at the party if they were famous. Rob and his son Nick allegedly had a very loud argument at the party where Rob told Nick his behavior was inappropriate. Rob and his wife Michelle then left the party to go home.
Nick interrupted former SNL comedian Bill Hader before storming off.
At 4 a.m., Nick curiously checked into the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica. When hotel staff went into Nick's room Sunday morning for apparently daily maid service, they found the shower full of blood on the bed, and the room's window was covered by bed sheets. At around 2 p.m., when the massage therapist came to the Reiners' door for their scheduled session and no one answered, it appears that's when their daughter Romy was contacted due to concern for her parents' health and safety.
Her home is next door to the family tennis court and across from her parents' main house.
Upon entering and making her way into her parents' bedroom, this is where 28-year-old Romy sadly found her parents in bed with multiple stab wounds, including their throats cut. Although Rob was sadly already passed away, Michelle was allegedly partially responsive, mentioning Nick did this in a dying declaration. However, Michelle died soon after.
Verifying we have 2 cardiac arrests.
Nick Reiner was spotted on video surveillance getting a drink at a convenience store gas station and was soon arrested at 9:15 p.m. near the USC campus without incident and subsequently charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. That's what we believe to be true so far in this case. So now let's piece together the evidence using psychology and behavior to gain a better understanding of why Nick allegedly did it and what may have occurred. That night, Nick was apparently addicted to substances again and would help explain why Nick was acting so odd at Conan O'Brien's holiday party.
Now I'd be curious where he got that from. Who said he was addicted to substances at that time? Now, it's probably true. It's probably true, but we don't know that for sure. And if he knows that for sure, I'll be curious where you heard that. I don't think anyone said it. And to be clear, he probably was using, if you ask me. I just don't think it's been confirmed.
Though Nick's mental health issues are mostly unknown, we know that by age 10, the Reiners hired yoga instructor Alana Zabel to help Nick calm some of his emotional outbursts.
So we're joined again by celebrity yoga instructor Alana Zabel.
Alana even wrote the book A Chair in the Air with the main character, little boy named Nicky. This all tells us that Nick has been apparently living with some less severe mental health problems, such as ADHD. It was reported that young Nick had very odd behavior where he would scream at the top of his lungs in an apparent attempt to gain attention. So this seems to tell us the parenting style of the household, where they may have been giving into Nick because it was just easier than to hear him scream. However, this is not uncommon with parents where they were just given to a child because it's just easier than to hear them scream. However, the child starts to get involved into drugs, for example, it becomes a real problem. In his early teens, Nick sadly became addicted to numerous hard drugs, including opioids and methamphetamine.
I was a real nutcase. I was crazy. And I just, it was more than drugs. It's really always about more than that. And I needed a lot of that sort of discipline.
When parents give into a child's tantrums early on, the child learns that pushing boundaries leads to getting what they want. Later in life, when something more serious like drug use comes into play, that same pattern can make it really hard for parents to set firm limits. The child might feel entitled that they can avoid consequences and keep pushing boundaries, leading to bigger and bigger conflicts. In the end, the family ends up in a tough cycle where early habits of giving in make it much harder to handle serious issues later on.
I would listen to them and the whole idea of tough love and you have to be a certain way. And it's not my nature. It's not the way I am built, but I went and did that.
And
here's the thing. On Facebook, I've been getting a lot of grief on Facebook about, I said, I think boundaries and consequences are important. And it seems to me so far, Rob and his wife might have enabled him to continue. But people were giving me a lot of pushback on that. You have no idea, Jared. Each situation's different. And then one person was saying, well, I gave tough love to my child and they're still dead now. It's like, well, here's the thing. You can do the right thing, but even when you do the right thing, there's no guarantee it's going to work. It's not always going to work, because when it comes to addiction, it's up to them. If they're not willing, they're not willing. And I agree, each situation needs to be taken individually. But that being said, I think Rob does need to protect himself and his family and his wife. And there's no shame in doing that. There's no shame in protecting yourself, especially if you think your son's going to hurt you, like allegedly he did think. So this whole case touches a lot of pain points, because there's a lot of people that have experience with family members that have struggled with addiction, family members that have struggled with mental health, or it might be themselves.
Notice here, it seems that Rob tries to avoid confrontation with his son.
It's not my nature. It's not the way I am built.
What worked is when they kind of like were like, you know what? They turned their back and they were like, you know, you got to figure it out for yourself. You're an adult now. Like, this is getting old.
Now watch this clip of Rob and Nick being interviewed together and see what you think.
Anybody with a desk and a diploma, I would listen to them. I know my child better than an expert does, and I probably should have trusted my own instinct. And that's one of the things I did learn about the whole experience.
As someone who has many desks and diplomas, what Rob said there is sadly very common and also very dangerous. First, not all professionals in any field are exactly the same, so it's important to find the right fit. However, the problem is that knowing someone personally does not equate to having clinical objectivity. You know why? Right, it's because emotional closeness can actually impair judgment. Furthermore, when addiction takes hold of someone, the person they know is no longer the same person, because the addiction overrides who you believe them to be.
I know Nick better than, some expert who's never met him. And I think had I listened to my own instincts, I would have done a lot better by Nick.
Therefore,
I think sometimes there can be a case for that. If you're very well versed in mental health and addiction yourself, or maybe like you're a professional yourself, and you're not going to treat your child goes to another professional, and maybe your parents disagree with the professional. Okay, that can be a thing. And I do say there's a time for believing someone is the expert on themselves, but that time is not when active addiction is at play and their ultimate goal is to continue using. When that's the case, they are no longer the best advocate for themselves in that case, because the part of them that doesn't want what's best for them is the part that is winning. And you know that because you look at their actions and you look at their lies and manipulation. But let's say if the part of Nick that wanted what was best for him was winning, okay, no, maybe that's not the worst person to believe. Because, now he's doing the right things. Maybe he's going to a 12-step program. Maybe he's med compliant. He's clean, right? So it depends. There's so many variables. It's hard to say black or white, yes or no, one way or the other.
The expert actually knows Nick quite well because they're trained and experienced in addiction behaviors, which are often more common among those who are addicted to substances. This is not saying that Rob should have just blindly gone along with whatever the expert said, but instead inquisitively question and challenge the expert from a position of collaboration, rather than looking at it as either going my way or the expert's way. Now watch this clip and see what you think of Rob's idea of what he could have done instead of putting Nick into rehab.
And I think that's where we made the mistake. Just the whole idea of throwing him into a rehab place, just saying, okay. And there's a punitive aspect.
But if you hadn't done that, how could you treat him you couldn't treat him on your own?
No, not on our own, but we could have maybe just worked with him with a therapist and, been a little bit more active in that way. I think we just overreacted.
Right here in
I don't know, overreaction is the right word. But here's the thing. There comes a point when you're a guy and maybe you're 32 years old like Nick. There comes a point when you have to know what's best for you. You have to find a way to figure it out. And I'm not saying it's easy in any way. It's extremely difficult. It took me a long time as well. I'm 40 years old now. It wasn't really until my late 20s, early 30s that I started to get into a better spot. Now, granted, I was clean in my 20s for the majority of it, but the ceiling of my potential was still lowered. So, but what needs to happen though is you got to be able to pick up the ball and say, okay, I know myself. Maybe I'm schizophrenic. Maybe I have something else. Maybe I'm undiagnosed on the spectrum. Okay, what do I do about this? And you got to find a way to be your best advocate and know how to take care of yourself. And it doesn't sound like Nick ever got to that point, which makes it very difficult. It makes it difficult to help someone that doesn't quite understand themselves, or the only way they see it is they just want to keep using. Makes it very difficult.
2016, Rob is basically saying they could have done a better job at treating Nick's substance addiction at his Hollywood mansion than putting him into a rehabilitation facility.
I think we just overreacted.
This mentality is sad, common, and dangerous. It's dangerous both to the patient and to their family. Most parents feel guilty putting their child in a locked treatment facility. However, sometimes that's what's needed to get their child better. Do you know why this type of do-it-yourself method is often not successful? Right, because overcoming substance addiction requires more than just therapy in your family's guest house.
What about when you wrecked the guest house on meth? You don't want to tell that story?
Yeah, I went 10 rounds with my guest house.
Psychologically, this is called hindsight bias. This is where Rob looks back at the work the rehabilitation facility apparently did to help Nick get sober, and now thinks he could have just done that in his backyard with just a visiting therapist to avoid feeling bad that he put his son in a locked treatment facility.
And that was not an overreaction to put him in those treatment centers and rehabs. That's not an overreaction at all. And this is just another clue, just like the clue of the Reiner siblings yesterday saying they don't blame Nick, they blame the doctors. Where do you think they got that mentality from? Probably their dad. And so here their dad is saying, oh yeah, we overreacted doing those things. And it's like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You did what you could at that time when you were listening to the professionals to get him help. That wasn't an overreaction. But now that he was thinking it was an overreaction, then you can see from there where poor decisions were made from that point.
Did you notice Nick's body language when his dad was saying what he will apparently do in the future?
We could have maybe just worked with him with a therapist and, been a little bit more active in that way. I think we just overreacted.
Right. Nick was not nodding in agreement with his father in understanding what may have worked better for Nick, but instead seems to be calculating that there's now probably going to be little to no penalty for relapsing again. Since Nick here in 2016 now knows he won't have to be locked in a rehabilitation facility all the way up in Maine again.
I'm sick of this cycle, this using drugs, it being so temporary, the fix, then going back into a place for months on end, then getting out and just, rinse, wash, repeat.
This being my life.
Yeah.
The penalty for relapsing now is what?
And again, if Nick was being truthful about what he just said, he's tired of the consequences. That's the place that I got to when I really improved. But if you listen to that Dopey podcast, he was also kind of saying he was just playing along in these interviews where he was just saying what he thought he should say, but his heart wasn't in it. But if his heart was really in it and he was saying that, that would have been a good sign. Yeah, you're tired of the consequences. You're tired of the temporary fix and then needing to go back again and again to the drug and then back to rehab because you keep messing up. Yeah, that is a normal thing to get tired of. It's a mature thing, dare I say. But if he was just acting and playing along and placating, not the same. Now he's just playing, and then he maybe used right after it. Yeah, no good. No good.
Right. Just to live in his parents' guest house and talk to a therapist a few times a week? It's no wonder that shortly after this interview, Nick sadly relapsed again.
I kind of knew that I wanted to relapse, basically. I didn't even want to call it a relapse. I just wanted to get back to my old life. I got back on dope and other things.
How did you go from just smoking weed and the occasional Adderall to relapsing on dope in the first place?
Well, how do you think? I'm a drug addict.
Did he know you had been a heroin addict in the past?
Yeah, he knew.
And apparently in recent months, he was so addicted to consuming hard drugs than ever before, just hanging out in his parents' guest house.
Wandering the Brentwood estate.
And again, in that dopey podcast, it's like, does that version of him sound like he's schizophrenic? Doesn't really sound like it to me. Could it be undiagnosed autism? That's a possibility. But I also think the vulnerable narcissism piece, I think that fits as well. And I don't deny he might have had anxiety and depression too, but I think the addiction piece is a big part of this story here, along with the personality disorders, if he does have one.
Where he allegedly killed his parents.
Say and spell your first and last name for me.
I ain't gotta tell you my first and last name. Most people know me as Did David.
And listen to what Nick said about being around his friends who do drugs.
Can you be in a room now where people are drinking or smoking pot or something, or do you consciously avoid those situations?
No, I want to be there when they're doing that, because I don't want to feel alienated like I'm some, special case, or I don't want to feel any different or alienated. I just want to be part of the crew again.
And any 12-step program or rehab will tell you that is a terrible decision, especially in the beginning. If you're getting clean, they say you want to avoid people, places, and things. And if you go to the barber shop long enough, it's just a matter of time before you get a haircut. It's like they would say to you in AA, what are you doing going to the bar, especially early in your recovery? Like, that's just not where a recovering alcoholic should be. The place where they're serving your drug of choice, booze. So you avoid those places. I'm not saying you have to avoid those places forever, because let's face it, you go to a restaurant, most restaurants might have a BYOB or a bar, depending on which one it is. But especially if you go specifically to a bar, that's what it's there for. Yeah, you want to avoid that kind of place in the beginning. Just for your own safety, just for your own sense of self-love and self-respect.
And just not do that other stuff.
Right, Nick still hangs out with his apparent substance-addicted friends, so of course it was only a matter of time before he relapsed again. And this is in no way to absolve Nick of these murders, because voluntary intoxication is not typically a good legal defense to homicide, and is not typically considered temporary insanity. So if I'm guessing, Nick's legal defense is going to claim that he has some other major mental illness that caused him to do this, more than just ADHD. You're surely wondering, how does being on drugs contribute to a person acting with extreme violence to murder? In this case, the apparent combination of many drugs, such as both uppers and downers together, can not only cause prolonged sleep deprivation, but also likely impair judgment, distort perception, and remove normal impulse control, which may cause a person's pre-existing emotional dysregulation to escalate to extreme violence.
You don't seem very fiery to me. You seem like you might just...
I get crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
You don't want to set me off.
Basically, drugs do not cause a person to commit violence, but they may make a person more impulsive, emotionally unstable, and less capable of them inhibiting those pre-existing violent desires and urges. Therefore, that night at Conan O'Brien's holiday party, when Nick got into a major argument with his parents...
Some big blow-ups there.
No, we both can get pretty...
You don't roll easily either.
No, we can both get pretty hot, and there were times when we did get hot.
If Nick was so angry that he wanted to physically harm his parents, especially since he's been known to express his anger through physical aggression...
Yeah, I went 10 rounds with my guest house.
When you're punching these things out, what is it to like relieve some tension? Is it like
he's high?
And I know, but is there any?
You're crazy.
You're crazy. Well, I mean, but is there any logic at all that translates into that you can remember and that can translate into real life? That still makes no logic. It's just this thing's going right now, boom, and then you.
It's sadly more likely that those violent impulses overrode any sober restraint, that he may have had in the past.
We're also seeing eerie new surveillance footage of Nick Reiner late Saturday night, casually strolling outside a gas station near his parents' estate. He was on his way to his parents' mansion, where cops say he carried out the slaughter. Notice he's wearing a baseball cap and carrying a black backpack.
And sadly snuck into their bedroom with the only weapon he had access to at that moment. Logically and sadly, he first incapacitated Rob, his father, with the usage of that knife, followed by Michelle, his mother. Given that there were sadly excessive stab wounds, indicates rage and personal hatred, possibly blaming his parents for his poor circumstances.
Both appear to suffer fatal stab wounds.
And if you're wondering, this is not an easy way to go if there is such thing, especially if certain anatomic structures are initially missed. Nick allegedly then leaves their Brentwood house because even Nick would know this is not going to look good for him when the sun rises. He apparently makes his way to Santa Monica at 4 a.m. using...
So people in the chat are asking about what's the method of action for antipsychotic drugs and weight gain. I don't really know how it happens. My presumption would be the way it interacts with dopamine, serotonin, and those other neurotransmitters probably does something where you have to eat and you get super hungry. Maybe it changes how you process blood sugar, perhaps. I know for me personally, I gained weight when I was on Zyprexa the most and Seroquel. But mostly it's Zyprexa. And what would happen is you take it at nighttime, and then it would give me the intense desire to eat like 20 pounds of food before I went to bed. And if I ever tried to not do that, I would wake up in the middle of the night eating my pillow and like having to gorge in the middle of the night and then go to sleep. So of course, when you do that, you're gonna gain weight. So it was causing me to like be massively hungry. Now, would the same thing have happened if I was on a lower dose of it? Possibly not. I don't know. But there's something about those drugs and what they interact on for me. It just makes people gain weight. But it did help my mood. It helped my mood, but it also kind of zonked me out as well, where I was tired. I wasn't myself. I didn't have any pep.
His credit card to check into the Pureside Hotel, which is likely a familiar and safe-feeling location for Nick. In moments when perpetrators feel they're in danger, they often subconsciously choose to hide away in an area that is most familiar to them, where they have felt safe in the past. After checking into his hotel room, he apparently hangs a bedsheet to cover the window, likely due to paranoia that his room's curtains will electronically open, fearing that they will reveal himself to aerial surveillance. Paranoia is common in stimulant intoxication and severe sleep deprivation because excessive dopamine and norepinephrine activation in the brain heightens threat perception and disrupts their ability to distinguish between real and imagined threats. Nick apparently showers and changes his clothes, leaving their room and bathroom bloody, which the maid service found later that morning. At this point, even Nick surely realizes that staying at the Pureside Hotel is a bad idea. Do you know why? Right, he realizes he's going to be a prime suspect and he just checked into that hotel with his credit card. Not to mention there was only one egress, so if the police knock on that door, it's all over for Nick. He likely leaves that hotel room in the mid-morning to make his way towards the University of Southern California campus. Surely another familiar area. This was where he surely spent time partying with his rich friends as a young adult, because USC is only 20 minutes from Brentwood. A late afternoon, a bolo be on the lookout was issued for him once his sister confirmed that her brother was likely involved. He was spotted on video surveillance footage buying a drink at a gas station convenience store and was quickly arrested at 9:15 p.m. nearby. Do you know why rich Hollywood children so often get addicted to drugs? Yes, this is psychologically because they grow up with extreme access to money, substances, and adult environments, while often lacking consistent structure, boundaries, and accountability. And sometimes, even at the same time, they face intense identity pressure, public scrutiny, and emotional isolation, which can create chronic stress and a sense of emptiness. And oftentimes their parents are extremely busy, focused on their careers, and spend limited time with their children. Substances then become an easy and socially normalized way to cope, self-regulate, or escape feelings they were never taught how to manage. A lot of money along with fame and less time spent involved in raising their children can quietly destabilize children emotionally and developmentally. Hollywood is usually a terrible place to raise children. RIP to Rob and Michelle Reiner, and our condolences are with their friends and family during this difficult time. Now in the comments, why do you think raising children in Hollywood can be so destructive to them?
So, what do you think about that? Why do you think raising children in Hollywood is so destructive? I have my suspicions. I mean, Hollywood in general and Malibu, they're just different out there. There's a lot of money, a lot of celebrity, a lot of narcissism, a lot of image-oriented stuff. And when you have all those kinds of people in the same place, I mean, let's face it, there's a fair amount of celebrities that have a fair amount of narcissism. And if that's who they are, there's a percentage chance their children have some of that. And there's also people in Hollywood that also have other mood disorders, mental illnesses, and addictions. And if they don't get them worked on, you know, they can environmentally contribute to their children's trauma in that way as well. But again, it depends on the situation. As I've mentioned before, Clint Eastwood, he did really good raising his kids, apparently. They turned out pretty well adjusted. But other people, not so much.
Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. And if you want exclusive content and channel perks, hit that join button now below, because your support makes all of this possible. It's just so sad because it seems that Rob thought he could help his son on his own. He didn't need to lock his son in a treatment center in Maine like he was doing before. So apparently he was trying out working with his son in his guest house and maybe just having therapists come and go to help him there, as opposed to locking him away in a treatment center. But if he was...
And here's the other thing. Between 2016 and 2025, what was going on in that time? That's a lot of time where he didn't do any other movies. So what the hell else was he doing? I don't think he was working. Was he still going to rehabs at that time as well? I don't think we know that either. Now, maybe the Reiner siblings can tell us that question, the answer to that question, but we don't know. We don't know what he was doing.
In a treatment center, none of this would have happened. At the same time, Nick does need to be held responsible for his actions. It's just so sad because it could have been avoided. See you next time.
And I agree with the ending with that. He does need to be held accountable. Now, the last one, I lied. There's going to be one more. And this is from a while ago, but Adam Carolla was talking to Dr. Drew.
The Adam and Dr. Drew Show.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on get on Dr. Drew's board for 5 seasons. What's going on out there, Drewski?
Everybody wants to hear my thoughts on Rob Reiner and that catastrophe. You want to get into it a little bit?
Sure.
So here's the thing. So Crazy just said in the chat, didn't Rob say Nick had been sober for 6 years? I think Rob said that, but that doesn't mean it's true, right? Because Rob, it sounds like he was a little naive in this case. So his son might have just been lying to him that he was clean, or he assumed he was clean, but he was really not. So we don't know. We don't know if he was clean or not.
Let's see. This is, it's most people are aware what happened, and yet no one seems to be able to make sense of what happened, which is exactly the point. That when people are on drugs or coming off drugs, they're to understand what they're doing, thinking, saying, behaving rationally is a gigantic mistake. Right?
Yeah. Look, as humans, we do that with dogs. You know, we go, listen, I'm your friend. I'm not trying to hurt you.
What is he thinking? He bit me.
I'm trying to help you.
Yeah.
Like they don't. We do that with everything.
Yeah.
We don't really get we do that with terrorists, and we do it with dogs, and we do it with drug addicts. Like if they just understood we're here to help, then they wouldn't blow us up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we get into big trouble with that.
Yeah. And
it literally gets people killed.
Well, one of the first, yes. And it doesn't help people either if you're trying to help them to do that. And one of the first lessons I learned working in a psychiatric hospital for all those years, early on, I thought, do not assume that other people's brains work like yours does. Do not make that assumption.
I have that trouble with women.
It's their brains don't work like yours does.
I'm talking about work at all. Not just like mine. You don't have to work on it.
Dr. Drew's correct about this. You can't assume everyone's brain's going to be the same. And in the addiction world, this is how you'll see it play out. So generally with the addicts, you see the 3 different kinds of addicts, right? There's the opiate addicts, the stimulant addicts, and then there's like the psychedelic folks, like the clubber raver types. But the stimulant addicts, their brain is different, generally speaking, than the opiate addicts. But you can tell by what drug people gravitate to, what their brains are like. So you have to figure out which group you're dealing with first. And it's a good thing to not assume this other person's brain is just like yours, because there's a good chance it's not.
My. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a huge mistake to superimpose your thinking on someone else's brain function. And so let's start with that. Then this kid has had multiple treatments, which is not uncommon. And there's this whole story that's kind of interesting. I spoke to a guy yesterday who knew, shit, why am I blocking on the son's name? Help me, anybody? Nick Reiner, yeah. And he had done some podcasting with him. It's a guy named Dopey Dave does the Dopey podcast. He was actually thinking about bringing Nick on as a co-host. He sort of liked him that much. But one of the things we both sort of started chatting about was how Rob Reiner's way of dealing with his son's illness was to make a movie about his son, right? Which is, it puts in a huge burden on the addict who's already feeling immense amount of guilt and shame to live up to this movie and what the father has portrayed him as, which of course they can't do.
Well, do we know?
And again, doctor, that's the one thing I disagreed with. Dr. Drew said he's talking about, they feel all this guilt and shame, the addicts. And I would say sometimes. I don't think all the time, especially if there's a personality disorder involved. It's like, where do you think all this guilt and shame is coming from? Especially if they have impaired empathy or a lack of empathy. I don't think it's always the case. Now, are there some who feel guilt and shame, especially maybe after a bender and they look back at what they did and they think, oh my God, what the hell did I do? Yeah, that's a possibility. But I also think it's a possibility that they really don't feel much of that, depending on what they got going on underneath the hood.
That was initiated by Rob Reiner?
The movie?
Yeah.
I mean, did the kid initiate it?
Well,
what do you mean?
Yeah. I don't know. Rob Reiner went to his kid and said, I want to make a movie about you.
Yeah. I saw them in interviews. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but
well, no, I mean, who wrote the script? Like, I asked, I don't know that it's Rob Reiner's idea to make the movie about the kid. The kid could have wanted to make a movie.
It's possible.
Nick,
it's possible.
And then recruited his. I mean,
it's possible.
Oftentimes, well, it depends.
Yeah.
Look, oftentimes famous director dads, when they do a project with their kid, it's their kid's idea because
100%.
the dad's off to bigger and better things.
Yes,
so
100%.
I don't know that he initiated it.
Yes, that could be. Can you guys help us with that? I don't know if that information is out there.
From what I can tell, Rob Reiner did initiate it because Nick did not write it by himself. He had a co-writer on it with him. Rob directed the film and produced it.
So Nick wrote it.
Nick co-wrote it.
Co-wrote it.
So who knows?
But that doesn't mean Rob Reiner
started it.
Started it. But anyway.
So who knows?
So he made a film with his son.
Yeah. I just saw the discomfort in the kid later in the interviews. I think he was already using it, already relapsed, and that's what we're seeing there. And may the kid set himself up for it. That's certainly possible.
And again, to me, that's not the only explanation for why he was uncomfortable. He might have been uncomfortable because his dad was there. He might be uncomfortable in the social situation because he's just nervous and has anxiety. He might be uncomfortable because he's undiagnosed on the spectrum. He might be uncomfortable because he's in a drug withdrawal in a way. Although in those interviews, I don't really get the impression he was in a drug withdrawal yet. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't using later. He said on the Dopey podcast he was using later. But there could be many explanations for why he was uncomfortable in that.
But there's another piece in here too, where there's during the promotion for that film, you see Rob, and this, by the way, Rob Reiner, let's all agree, good guy, great guy. And you may not have agreed. He may not have agreed with you, Adam. You may not agree with things he said. Does not deserve at all what happened
All
here.
right, you don't have to give the precursor all the time.
Well,
But look, there are guys you disagree with and they're douchey.
Mhm.
And then there are guys you disagree with and they're nice people.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a nice person.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a super talented person and stuff. And
Yeah.
so, in any event, I saw him in an interview saying, I should never have listened to professionals. My parenting, I know my son better than anybody. My instincts, I should have followed my instincts. And I thought, oh, that's how you get yourself into trouble, because people don't get that, because it's such a profound motivational disturbance, that the child or any individual that you are involved with will pull you into the condition. Even me as a doctor, when they come to me for help, I get spun into their disease, which is why I always kept a nurse in the room with me, not because I was worried about getting accused of something, but because she would kick me in the chair if she heard me sort of going into their bullshit, like believing stuff, co-signing stuff. That, and that's why you have to have a sponsor in codependency treatment who you check in with every time you deal with your kid. I know it's all horrible and cumbersome, but you got to check in with somebody who knows this condition and go, hey, did I say this right? Was I wrong here? What did I get wrong? How do I correct that? Because on your own, you won't see it and you'll get sucked in. And that's that. And that, I think.
Well, I mean, he went to rehab 17 times.
Bob Forrest went to rehab 22 times.
Really?
Yeah. It's not uncommon at all for people to need multiple treatments.
Okay. I think in Rob's.
And here's the thing. There is a time for talking politics and disagreeing on politics, but then there's a time to also just see people as fellow humans. And the Rob Reiner case to me is a case where you just see someone in the family as fellow humans. Now, that doesn't mean you can't disagree with some of their courses of action, but you think about it, I think, in the human plane, not the political plane.
In terms of his statement about the experts, when you do 17 times with the experts, then at a certain point you get the idea that maybe the experts aren't as adept at this, or maybe. Well, first off, it's hard to fail more than 17 times. I know you can, but what I'm saying is if I took my car and have the transmission fixed 17 times to the dealer, at some point I'd go, well, maybe I should fix it myself, or I'll try. I don't think that'd be an unwarranted conclusion.
I will tell you what happens though every time you, continuing the transmission metaphor. Every time you bring it in, you go, no, let's deal with those belts later. No, don't worry about the exhaust. And the guy's like, it's gonna blow. You gotta no. There's always these.
Well, I don't know how to fix a transmission. That's probably your biggest argument for me.
Meaning you should listen to me about the transmission.
Well, I've tried you 17 times. Now I'm going to try myself, but I don't know how to fix the transmission either.
Right.
So let
me add the score up of things that people routinely don't do that they must do, or the identified kid can die. We're talking about meth, heroin here, particularly, or fentanyl, whatever. If they get arrested, make sure they go to prison. And if they are doing illegal things, make sure they get arrested, and then make sure they go to prison.
So Dr. Drew seems to be on the consequences and punitive measures treatment plan, which I do think can help some people. Now, depending on who you are, though, you might go to prison and you might meet all of the wrong people, and you might get worse, and you might catch what I call psychopathic fleas. Narcissistic fleas is when you start picking up on some of the behaviors of a narcissist you spend a lot of time around. So think if you have a narcissistic parent and you're the kid, you can develop CPTSD from the experience. And in my opinion, narcissistic fleas is a symptom of CPTSD. But I think you can even have narcissistic fleas without developing CPTSD, because we become like the people we surround ourselves with. So then you go to prison and you're surrounded with all sorts of psychopaths, sociopaths, personality disordered people, addicts. It's a crapshoot whether you become more like them or you have the strength and resolve to do your own thing and try to turn your life around. It certainly isn't cut and dry, that's for sure. And you see both.
Okay, they never do that. No one ever
Yeah,
does
yeah.
that.
Well,
Okay.
look, I
So-
mean,
and in California, it's hard to do that. They don't put them in prison for anything.
The reality is, they are not. If they're okay, if you are out and you have resources, and you're going to find a way
to get treatment or to use.
To use if you're out.
Yeah. Correct.
And it needs. We don't like incarcerating people, and we don't like incarcerating people because of drugs, but it will save their life,
right?
Because they can't access the drugs,
right?
And
well, not just that.
Because what is he talking about? Does he think there's no drugs in prison? There's absolutely drugs in prison sometimes. It's clear as day that can be a possibility. So, granted, the drugs are weaker in prison, but let's not pretend like there's no drugs there. There can absolutely be drugs there. There's corrupt guards all of the time, or guests and visitors smuggle them in. That absolutely happens.
Loss becomes the primary motivator, right?
Well, I'm just saying from just a physical standpoint. Look, we could put you in a cage in the living room and it would work.
That's right.
We'll feed you breakfast bars
That's right.
and Gatorade, and we'll put a latrine there, and you'll sit in a cage
by the
in
way,
the living room.
There was shit like that going on in Mexico for a while, where parents were doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would work. It would be,
Sort of.
it'd be, it'd be miserable and all that kind of good stuff. But I mean, the reality is prison has cleaned up a lot of people, and I would argue that the low income nobodies now not in New York City and not in Los Angeles, but if you were in Indiana or Kentucky or whatever, and you're just a low-level nothing person with no money, and you get caught up with drugs, you end up going to prison, and then you end up getting sober because you went to prison. Now, if you're in Manhattan or Los Angeles, there's a revolving door, so you don't do that. And if you're...
And here's the thing. Here's a question. So imagine this didn't happen, and maybe Nick gets arrested for drugs enough times where he does go to prison for 6 months. What do you think happens to Nick? I don't think Nick would particularly handle jail well. I don't think it would be, he's not the kind of person that seems like he'd be able to make it on the inside there. But that being said, it might have also scared him straight, perhaps. That's a possibility too. But now we just won't know.
Dad's famous and has a lot of money, then you don't do that. But it's probably, if you're some kind of white trash with no family income and you're in a red state that doesn't tolerate that shit,
hey man,
then you go somewhere and then you end up getting clean.
One of the teen moms got in that mess. She was dying of fentanyl addiction in Indiana. And they put her in long-term and put her in a long-term program while she was there. She ended up being a peer counselor. It was magnificent. It was a couple year and a half, couple of years, and it was like, this is how you do it. This is how you do it.
But letting them languish on the streets or in a guest house is not really the answer.
Correct. But it's important for people to know, and this is the point I'm trying to make, is that one of the things that breaks through denial, one of the ways to break through that disturbance of motivation that is drug addiction is loss. And the things that get lost that catch the attention, not always, but often catch the attention of addicts, is loss of life, like they have a near-death experience. So loss of health, loss of life. Loss of, for women particularly, their children. Then, oh shit, I got to get something together. Loss of important family members, spouses, that kind of thing. Loss of access to your kids, if you're a man. That gets them. And then loss of freedom.
Correct. Loss of freedom and consequences were a big one for me. Now, I also volunteered as a mentor for kids that were taken by DIFUS/CPS because their parents were using. And even then, some of those parents still didn't turn it around and they still messed up. But occasionally, some did really improve and their kids were enough of a motivating factor to help them to turn their lives around. But some people absolutely used to the point where they lose their kids and the kids get taken by child protective services.
It's not just that they're cleaning up in prison. It's that they don't like the loss of freedom, and it makes them think, maybe I should do something different. I've got a friend of mine who's a long-term recovering, he's a magnificent nurse now and a nurse practitioner and stuff. He was a nurse administrator, and he was a he was a garbage bag kind of thing. And but he trafficked in cocaine in Newport Beach, of all things. And he kept going in prison, getting arrested. He was on one of these street corners, up by not Fashion Island, but South Coast Plaza. And every time you get in prison, you go, I must have been in the wrong corner. So he kept changing corners. And then the last time he got arrested, he's like, oh man, something is really wrong. What is wrong with me? Oh, I know. I keep the cocaine in my shirt pocket. I got to put it in my socks. That's the thinking of drug addiction, right? And then finally it did get through to him, finally, after multiple arrests. And it took somebody reaching out their hand, somebody kind going, you tired of this? And you tired yet? You tired of this? And he went, yeah, I'm tired. Well, let us show you a different way. And that's how people get well. It is how they get well. And it's hard to watch and it's dangerous. That's the other part, which is how do you keep somebody safe through all that? And of course, the addict plays that up on the parent, particularly the mom. They will say constantly, the mom believes the child will die if the mom doesn't do something.
And there's another thing to note. And this is where I would directly disagree with Rob. Rob had said there's no one in jail that had a good childhood. And the reason I disagree with that is because there does not have to be childhood trauma for someone to turn into an addict or to have a mental illness. Why? Because some mental illness can absolutely be innate. It's genetic, hereditary, biological. So by no fault of the parents, you can have a mood disorder. You can be on the spectrum and not know it. You can have schizophrenia. You can be bipolar. And then when you have those issues, and then when you find relief in a substance, of course you're going to like those substances when your normal baseline mental health is no good. To me, none of that has to do with childhood trauma. Now, sometimes, absolutely, childhood trauma is a thing, and absolutely it doesn't make anything better. But I want to get rid of the notion that it's the only cause. I think there are other causes as well. And this is what Dr. Salerno and I have talked about, as well as with Dr. Simon as well.
That is the main play of the child with alcohol and addiction. They play on the mom more than the dad, and then they create conflict between the mom and the dad. If the dad is
easy, they go to the mom, right?
Yeah, and the mom's like, okay, he's gonna die. He's gonna die. He says he's gonna commit suicide. So there we go.
But suicide, if what? Though?
They'll use death all over the place. But
what's the mom going to do for him in this pscenario?
We got to bring him home. We got to put him in his room. We got to.
Oh yeah.
He's out on the streets. What are we going to do?
Nick was out on the street for long periods of time.
I know. So somehow they did get the message, or Nick just blew out. So I don't know. I don't know what was happening there.
All right. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with more after this. Mint Mobile. Well, nothing can ruin the season of giving spirit like checking your phone bill and
mintmobile.com.
So it's a complicated matter, and do not blame two things I hate: blaming the parents. Do not blame the parents. We're not blaming the parents. We're just sort of using this case as something to learn from. And I hate it when people blame the patients too for everything. That drives me crazy. When people have mental health problems, they go, well, he wasn't motivated. He didn't want to get well. It's like, that's part of the problem. That's not part of the disease.
Well, drug. What is his drug?
We know that opiates, mostly long-term, this is the story of opiates. But I'm going to posit that I smell meth in the play here
because of the violence,
and the knives, all the machetes you see out on the street of Los Angeles, people carrying machetes and going after people. That's meth, always. So the violence and the picking up an eye.
I'll be careful with saying always, but this is what Dr. Drew said on the Brian Etton show as well. Now, to circle back to what someone was saying in the chat about childhood trauma, I don't think childhood trauma is going anywhere. There's always going to be some form of childhood trauma. As long as there's narcissism, as long as there's personality disorders, as long as there's addiction, there will be childhood trauma. That being said, there's more awareness of this stuff now than ever because of social media. So that's something to keep in mind here too. Now, what Dr. Drew just said, he's mad at people that blame the patients. Again, it's not about blame. It's about encouraging people to take responsibility. And I fully acknowledge a mental illness is going to make it that much harder for people to even want to be clean if that drug or drink is the only way they find relief. Absolutely. But even so, you still got to try. You still got to encourage them to take that extreme ownership and accountability, because what other choice do you have? There's no choice. It's either that or just have them be basically a shell. That's not what you want.
Object, particularly sharp objects, that seems to be meth most of the time. And meth, you know, I'm going to say he won't remember this. He doesn't even know he did it, I bet you. And that's not him lying. They get...
This is Dr. Drew talking out of his ass here. He doesn't know this. And the same thing with the only people committing crime on the streets are people using meth. I mean, sure, plenty of them are using meth, but that's not the only thing they're using. People can be drinking and doing it, taking Adderall and doing it, smoking crack and doing it. So it's not just meth. And to say that he just doesn't know what he did, that he was blacked out in some sort of meth psychosis, we'd have no idea about that. He's talking out of his ass with this.
In these fugue states on meth, they don't know what the hell's going on. Yeah, they just get disorganized and black out or red out or just don't even know. It's awful. It's awful.
And the daughter went and discovered it. 28-year-old daughter.
Oh, was she the one that discovered it?
Yeah.
And she was very close to Rob too, it looked like to me.
Well, she went in, according to latest reports, she went in to do like a wellness check. And by the way, they must have been close, because if my sister stabbed my mom and my dad, I might not know for months. It's not like I call them every morning. You know what I mean? Like
they're not checking in with the grandkids.
My dad said he was buying me a dirt bike. Where is it? No, I mean, your adult relationship with your kids, and it's got some range, but she was checking in, like pretty much seemed like on a daily basis, right? And so she must have been very close to go over there. I mean, if I called my parents on a Sunday morning, they didn't pick up the phone, I'd think they were walking or something.
Yeah,
you know, I wouldn't head over.
I saw
also
her.
knew. She also knew that Nick was dangerous because I don't say she knew this was coming, but she suspected. Well, she immediately called him out. So when they found out, when the cops showed up, she was like, "Go find my brother." So she must have had some inkling that he was capable of something, or that they were in. I don't think she felt comfortable with him living in the house because she felt like he posed a danger. She must have known something. She must have heard something, seen something. You know, she's her sister. So she went over there. She lived across the street from her parents. And the thing that was weird is I heard that she discovered Rob and then just ran out of the house.
Well,
but
sure.
But no, the only reason I'm saying that is, where was the mom? Presumably, if they got stabbed in the middle of the night, they would presumably be in the same bed. And you would walk in and you would see two people, and then you would run out. So,
or you wonder if Rob, muscled through, went after him or something.
Yeah, something staggered to his feet and crawled down the hallway or something.
Exactly.
Horrible.
Beyond,
Drew.
Beyond, yeah.
So, I know they had a big argument at Conan O'Brien's house before then.
Bill Hader was involved with that or something, right? Was that who it was?
Yeah, I ran into him at the Lakers game a few weeks ago. He was a very delightful guy, so I'm not going to put this on Bill.
No. There's no fault, I don't think, here anywhere. I mean,
well, there's no fault for anybody who.
So, Ann, I wanted to ask you this: what is Drew says both, like myself? Drew says both what?
Was at a party and told someone to be quiet, let me finish my story, or something like that. Obviously, that's not a thing. So weird a little bit that he came to the party.
Well,
because I have friends that, aren't good at parties, and I figured that out. And I've avoided them showing up to parties, especially if the person's notable and the group is notable. That's going to be an environment where that person is not going to do well.
Yeah. Well, the report is that Rob brought him, quote, keep an eye on him. Unquote.
Oh.
And keeping an eye on someone with addiction is never a good thing, whether it's a sober partner or a parent or whatever. It just suggests things are not going well at all.
Yeah, well, so evidently things weren't going well,
No.
and evidently leaving him alone in the house was probably not something that Rob and his wife wanted to do.
And then there's one last sort of wrinkle in this whole story, which is that you keep hearing there's mental health problems. Well, sure, anybody that does. He did about a bunch of hallucinogens early, apparently, and that causes mental health problems of all varieties. And he was doing meth, which also causes manias and psychoses and actually destroys parts of the brain, mood disturbances of all types. So, yeah, I'm sure he had mental health problems, but the primary thing was the addiction, and the mental health problems probably all stem from that. However, the kinds of mental health problems that people can get into with drugs can be associated with severe delusions, where you believe your parents are trying to kill you, or you have to kill your parents so the devil doesn't get them, or who knows what.
That's the schizophrenic explanation the others were talking about. And of course, stimulants like meth or crack could make schizophrenia worse, right? But we don't know. We don't know if that's the case.
So that happens also.
Yeah, so what do you think? They're going for the death penalty.
I think that's an overreach. I think it's a mistake. I don't think they're going to get that. Yeah. Because there's so many confounding things here. Just come on. I mean, unless he has said repeatedly while sober, I need to kill my parents, which I don't know anybody said that or heard that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's just going to end up with the Menendai.
And here's the other thing I want people to take home. If they had allowed him to get arrested and spend a couple of years in prison, he would not be spending the rest of his life in prison. He would have spent a couple of years there, and that would be that. The other thing, and this is the last thing, is that the way situations like this need to be treated is they have to go inpatient, get stabilized. They have to go to residential for a couple months and make sure they're doing okay. And then they need to go to a long-term structured environment. This is how
I agree with this. That's the order of operations. I think when there's addiction to mental health, first you get clean. Sometimes there can be medically assisted treatment to help you get clean, but you get clean. Then you get observed to see how any mental health or mood disorder issues are doing. Then you try to get properly medicated on that if you need to be. And then a long-term structured environment to keep you on the straight and narrow. Now, in some cases, 12-step programs can fill that role. But for some people, they need it more structured than that because, generally speaking, you'll go to one meeting a day. You can go to more, but it's not that structured. So I definitely agree. And I don't want to get it twisted. I was only saying Dr. Drew was talking out of his ass because he was saying, I bet that Nick was high on meth when he did that and he doesn't remember. He can't say that for sure. Most things Dr. Drew says, though, I have agreed with, especially when he was speaking to Brian Etten.
RFK Jr. got sober. He was in a work farm for, I think he said 2 years. And those are like $500 a month. So
a work farm.
Yeah. And you work there and you have meetings, you have sober peers and stuff. And you get vocational rehab, hopefully, so you can start to make a productive life again afterwards. But you need to be there for a long time. It takes a long time for the brain mechanisms to settle down and for sobriety to kick in. It's not a 30-day thing. You won't even remember the first 3 months, 9 times out of 10. So to put a bunch of money and effort into the early parts of treatment is anathema. It makes no sense.
Mhm.
And so just a general principle.
I agree with that too. I think $70,000 a month, when the best thing that place is going to do for you is get you clean for a time, you can do the same thing with a $5,000 a month program. To get you clean, you're still at the same place, whether you spent $5,000 or $70,000. So I agree with Dr. Drew on this.
If you're spending a lot of money, don't go there. It shouldn't cost a lot of money. You should go somewhere that's bare bones, that's willing to take the patient for a long period of time, that doesn't put up with any bullshit, that has a lot of experience with this particular drug of abuse. And there you go. You just go in there and you find ways to leverage it and keep them there.
Words of wisdom from Dr. Drew.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to be at the Sagebrush Cantina tomorrow night with Brad Williams. It's bring your ugly sweater, by the way. We'll have a competition. And then over the weekend, I'll be at Kimball's Club.
All right. And that's enough of that. Let's see. Should we wrap it up, or should we find one Tony Bruschi video to watch? And again, I think the best thing a drug and alcohol rehab does is it gets you a little bit of time from your drink or drug of choice. That's the best thing it does. And considering that's the best thing it does, I don't think you need to be spending $70,000 for the month to do that. You can accomplish the same things for $5,000 a month. Okay, we'll put a Tony video on here. We got to pick one though. Which one? Maybe on another day this week, I'll go over that dude who offed himself and his wife over a stupid football game. He's going over a lot of Kohberger's case. I don't know that much about the Kohberger case, for that matter. This looks like a good one. Insanity in the Law. This is interesting.
This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Bruschi, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
Nick Reiner was diagnosed with schizophrenia years ago. He was in treatment, expensive treatment, at a facility that reportedly charges $70,000.
And he's saying this as if it's definitely true as well. He doesn't know. The only source of that is TMZ, and TMZ said an undisclosed source close to the case told them. Probably the defense team, probably Alan Jackson. But notice how a lot of people are taking that as gospel now and saying, yes, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia years ago. And unless there's new information and new people that have confirmed that, I don't think that's confirmed at all. Let me know if I'm wrong, chat. I haven't seen it if they have confirmed it.
A month. He was under psychiatric care, and according to multiple sources, his medication was changed 3 to 4 weeks before the alleged stabbing took place of both of his parents. The defense attorney is Alan Jackson. Yes, that Alan Jackson. He's already calling the case very complex publicly. Translation, the insanity defense is coming. So the question now isn't just what happened. It's whether Nick Reiner understood what he was doing when he did it and whether that matters. With us, Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, to help us break it all down. Alan Jackson's first words outside of the courthouse in this case were, quote, "It's a very complex and serious issues." Obviously, when a high-profile defense attorney is using language before the arraignment even happens, what do you think he's signaling about his strategy, Jen?
Well, he's signaling that he's going to use every complex issue he can to excuse the behavior of Nick Reiner in this murder. I expect the kitchen sink. It's going to be everything from insane due to his schizophrenic nature. It's going to be the drugs made him do it. And Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if you hear about abuse that won't be able to be proved, but will be thrown out there as a red herring. I
didn't say that people that did meth were not violent. I'm just saying it's not the only cause of violence. And I'm saying we don't know for sure Nick was under the influence of meth when he did that. That's what I'm saying. He was saying the violence of homeless people is always meth. It's not always meth. It can be crack. It can be booze. There can be other things involved. That's what I was saying.
expect it all from this guy.
I hope that doesn't happen, because this is a beloved Hollywood human being. I mean, this is somebody that a lot of us have grown up with. We've watched his movies. We've followed him for years. I watched The Princess Bride 2 weeks ago, for F's sake. I mean, you can't drag him through the mud. You just can't. So Alan's got to walk a fine line here.
You can only drag if there's evidence.
True.
But Nick, his words, that's not evidence.
Right.
That's the problem. And unless there is some sort of evidence behind any of that, that's what my concern is too. Because I feel like, and I hope not, I hope we don't get there. But I'm wondering right now, the fact that the schizophrenia thing is out there, I think we can make a reasonable guess as to where this information is coming from. It's probably from the defense, and it's probably the beginning of a PR campaign to humanize Nick, to get empathy for Nick, and look at he's schizophrenic and he was trying to get help and it didn't work. How well do you think this is all going to land on the general public in this case?
Well, if history is any indication, we've seen already in this case that it's not landing very well. While I think people are certainly sympathetic to individuals who are struggling with addiction and struggling with mental health, everyone understands that there's a lot of addicts and there's a lot of people struggling with their mental health, and they're not murdering their parents and
Yeah, without a doubt. Nick's medication was reportedly changed 3 to 4 weeks before the murder. Sources say it made him more erratic and dangerous. Legally, how does a documented medication change factor into the insanity or diminished capacity defense? And after that, I want to talk about, are others going to be facing any sort of repercussions here if this is how the medication management was taking place with a $70,000 bill allegedly? But let's go to the first part.
You know, that piece is very interesting to me, because you would think that for that type of money and for this type of diagnosis and treatment regimen, you would have him in some sort of inpatient situation, especially if you're going to change the meds. Now, my guess is Nick wanted nothing to do with being inpatient anything.
And here's the other thing, though. Just because you change meds doesn't mean you're always inpatient. There's a lot of people that take meds and try meds and get off of meds, and they're not in any kind of treatment facility at all. In fact, I would say even the majority of cases, there's no treatment facility involved. There's just a psychiatrist, and that's it. And the person's just trying to live their life. Now, it's for $70,000 a month. I imagine that was an inpatient facility for $70,000 a month. But once you're there, I don't think they can force people to take meds if they don't want to, or maybe they can cheek them or something, but there really is no way to force compliance in that case, I don't think.
We don't even know if he was truly taking that medication. You can be prescribed a lot of things and it can sit right there on the shelf. And a lot of individuals who struggle with mental health do not want to be medicated. Thus the reason they're in crisis all of the time. So we don't even know what he was really taking. So to your point, I think it would be very difficult to go after the doctor or the institution or hospital, whatever that was responsible for treating him. I really do.
The price tag, I think, is what gets everybody, but people can charge what they want. And if that's what the Reiners were willing to pay, and it may not be this magical inpatient center that one would think you would get for $70,000 a month, then it doesn't have to be. I guess I wonder if this is just going to expose anything in terms of exorbitant medical costs, for those who can afford it, and what are you actually getting that's different than folks who are offering literally the same sort of services for lesser cost. I wonder if it's going to shine any sort of light onto that here.
Doesn't feel like much of a testimonial for the people that were helping him, does it?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think truly that, it shows just the huge hiatus between people who are worth $200 million and people who are worth $20,000 and what they can afford. I mean, let's be fair. $70,000 a month might be more like $70 a month to you and me, even though it's crazy and over the top in terms of a price tag. The amount of money that he would still be bringing in just from royalties and nothing else would be unbelievable. And so they could afford it, and he had the best, but the best or the most expensive doesn't mean the best.
Yeah.
Correct. Just because it's the most expensive doesn't mean it's the best. The best thing that rehab facilities do is get you clean off a drug. But we don't even really know if you went there specifically for drug use or if it was more mental health related. My guess would be there was probably addiction in there, is my guess. And whatever mental health symptoms were there, the drug use was making it worse. That's my guess, but that's not a fact. That's just a guess. Now, the other thing I was going to say was, I forget what I was going to say. It was, I'll think of it in a second.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's this whole thing we look at and we just go, I mean, it was so preventable. If there were,
that's what it is. So people said the cops were called many times to their household. So it would be very interesting to hear from the Brentwood police. Oh, what were you getting? And again, this might be against the rules for them to even say this, but what were you going to the house for? What was going on in those cases? Was Nick being violent? And if he was being violent towards his parents or maybe siblings, probably not siblings, probably parents, but you never know. You never know. But if that was the case, that's just more writing on the wall that you need to protect yourself. Like, it's just like if I'm a parent and my son is attempting to be violent against me, like that's too far. That's too far. And you have to protect yourself. And then as a man also, I would think I have to protect my wife, unfortunately, from my son. And again, no one wants to think that about their son, but unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes. So however many times the police were called, I don't know. And this is what Dr. Glasner mentioned as well, which I think was a good thing to bring up. How much violence was there in the history? And if there was some, that's more writing on the wall to not ignore. And if they did ignore it, disappointing.
Or more safeguards in place for situations like this. When you're looking at the big picture, you have the option of, you can go throw him onto the street and hope he doesn't die. And it looks like they did attempt that several times. And he kept coming back alive. Then you put him into treatment ungodly amounts of times. Then he convinced him that treatment wasn't working. So they found something in the middle where they were believing there.
So Alan Jackson's on retainer. And I don't know if it's confirmed, but my guess is the siblings are doing it. What makes me think that is the siblings are the ones that blame the doctors, not Nick. So I think that's what's going on because Alan Jackson has definitely been hired. The only question is who paid them. My guess would be the siblings because of what they said about blaming the doctors, not him.
Addict son, but there's nothing in that middle ground where we don't believe our addict son, but he's not willing to get the help that he needs. You only have those two options because you can't forcibly commit somebody unless we're talking about having the conservatorship put into place, which allegedly they were beginning to look into doing. Is that something, that conservatorship, that lever of the law, is this going to be a case that maybe makes us think about this a little bit more on reality's terms? People, I think, villainize that whole idea of conservatorship with the whole Britney thing. And I say, look at this. Do you think she's better off now than where she was before? Judging by knife play naked on TikTok, that doesn't seem like she's in a great place mentally. It seems like there was a reason for it. I would say that's probably something that Nick should have had. But again,
so I did speculate before that maybe Alan Jackson was going to take this case pro bono just for the attention, fame, and publicity, and then have it pay for itself down the line. But I don't think that's what's happened because they put him on retainer. So someone's paying him. But, in a case like this, there might be some popular lawyers that if the siblings weren't paying for it, maybe a popular lawyer would say, you know what? Let me get my name out there. This is a way to get my name across all the headlines and have it pay for itself down the line. I'll do this thing for free. Sure, it's a lot of work, but they might see it as an investment in their future.
you have to move heaven and earth sometimes, depending on where you're at, to get a conservatorship. Do we need to re-examine the insane amount of hoops of fire one has to jump through when they're just trying to save someone that they love from themselves?
Yeah, I think the conservatorship situation does need to change, Tony. It shouldn't take an act of God. It should take evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt that the individual needs to have somebody else making their legal decisions, inclusive of their treatment decisions for them. In other words, he needs to be put in an inside treatment facility, not exterior treatment facility, even something like that. This is what was clear to me. The Reiners, and we all have family, friends, somebody we know that has been through this, that has a child or a relative that is out of control. And I really feel for them. And it's not like they weren't trying. It's not like they abandoned their son. I mean, they did everything they could. And then look at what he did. Listen, I don't have much sympathy for Nick Reiner. I think he knew what he did was wrong. I think that's why he fled to that hotel room. That's why he washed off. And I think that, I think he knew what he did was wrong. I think he's a bad seed.
I agree with her. I think Jennifer here is correct. He knew, and I think he's a bit of a bad seed. I think he had some impaired empathy too.
Sorry, I'm going to say it.
No, I agree. I think that there was nothing more that could have been done for him, short of forced being admitted in a facility where this is, you're here, you have no choice, you are a danger to yourselves. And I think it would have just been still a life of torture because he had a very broken brain. But I think that would have been the only thing that would have kept him safe. But we don't have the levers to push that unless the conservatorship could have gone into place. But obviously that did not happen. The death penalty is on the table in a case like this. But with the fact, number one, it's California. So your odds, unless there's some sort of dramatic governmental change in California, nobody's getting the death penalty anytime soon. But even if you were to get it, now that we have schizophrenia on the table, and if that is truly a real diagnosis that he has, which it very likely is, how do you think that plays into the possibility of the death penalty? Plus, they're going to be consulting the family. The Reiners were not pro-death penalty folks, as far as I think.
I'd be shocked if the death penalty even comes into the equation. In my opinion, it's just not going to be a thing. But let's see what they say.
Most would understand.
I don't think there's any chance the death penalty comes into play here.
Yeah.
People are talking about it and throwing it around, but no way. With the mental issues that they're putting on the table, with the drug issues, and with the fact there's a moratorium right now, as you referred to, on the death penalty cases in California anyway, no way. There's way too many special circumstances that are going to serve as sort of mitigation for what he did.
Yeah, it's just horrible all around, and I don't know that I can imagine the kids. Nobody can speak for them, but I can't imagine that they're wanting to end in another death. I mean, I can't imagine what they're going through. I just can't. But yeah, you're right. So many of us have seen this sort of thing play out, maybe not to this extreme, but folks who have a loved one, a child, quite often that just out of control and their hands are completely tied. And this, while it's on a huge scale because of who these people are, these sort of things play out, not always ending in the death of the parents, but play out in families every single day across the country with people with their hands tied, the same way that the Reiners did. It shows money does not solve everything by any means.
And these are the people we see and we walk by, for those of us who live in the downtown area. These are the people that are struggling with these very issues. And they would rather, and remember this is out of Nick's mouth, a paraphrase, he would rather be on the streets in Maine and Jersey, Texas, and for all those years than be, institutionalized or in a rehab place. So that says a lot to me right there.
Yep. I agree.
That's frightening as we finish up our Christmas shopping.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, the busy mall.
Want more on the...
All right. That's the end of that. So I'll say before I wrap this up here, the best case scenario for Nick is more than likely he gets sentenced to a mental hospital, and maybe several decades from now, they deem him to be no longer a risk, and he gets released like the guy who attempted to assassinate Reagan. Now, truly the best case would be he just walks, period, but that is so unlikely, I'm not even going to say it. The only way that's possible is Jackson finds a way for there to be a mistrial. And I just don't think that's going to happen. What do I think will happen, though? I think he'll get 30 to 40 to life in regular jail is what I think. I'd be pretty surprised if he gets confined to the mental hospital. But that being said, if anyone can get that for him, it's probably Alan Jackson. But I think what he should get, if he wasn't coming from a wealthy background and having a good lawyer, he'd probably get at least 30 to 40 to life. You could even say a life sentence for each of his victims. That wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility either. So that would be my thoughts. That's my thoughts on the case. End up like the Slenderman girls? That's possible. And Kylie, if you manage to get conservatorship, you are 100% liable for their behavior and can't force meds. That's dangerous. It's dangerous for the people taking responsibility, right? Yeah, I would agree. 40 years to life. That's technically fair. He won't get the death penalty, but 40 years to life. Thank you, B. I appreciate you. I'll most likely be back again tomorrow night. Jimmy, are you still in the chat? Yeah, I mean, he needs to be held accountable. I don't think there's enough evidence at this very moment to say he was psychotic and should get a not guilty by reason of insanity. No, I don't think so. Be very surprising. But all right, everybody, thanks for watching. Thank you, Ann, for all your good comments there, and Carol and everyone else who was commenting. I definitely appreciate it. And maybe, depending on how the news unfolds tomorrow, maybe we'll talk about a different case tomorrow night. We'll see. I absolutely agree, Danielle. I think he did. Cat. Oh, Lord. All right, guys. Everyone have a great night. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate that. Welcome to the black sheep flock here. There's a great flock of black sheep here. Thank you, Kat. Everyone have a good night.